So it's fascinating because both of us, we're sort of doing exactly what we want. We've managed to like find a hole in the world in the shape of us. And you know, it's a cliche, but to make your passion and profession one, I've managed to make watches part of my life on a daily basis. You've got both the cars and the watches, and you sort of work as a consultant, helping, I guess, classify collectibles at vintage and vintage luxury collectibles as like a class of asset. So how did you make your dream and your passion your everyday reality?
It's kind of one of these, when you end up talking about something that you're incredibly passionate about, and then someone else gets really excited and they say, well, how do I get in, how do I get into this a little bit more? It's not just the, you can find anything on Google, so to speak. You can, you can go to dealerships, you can go to watch dealers, but it's kind of another thing to talk to someone who is just as passionate about, or well, really where they're getting their passion from, and helping them develop the passion. So it's not just about selling something, it's figuring out what someone will love. If someone isn't going to love something, or they don't like the direction that something's going, it's never somewhere that I want to take them. But if they love it, it's amazing, because I know where a lot of cars or watches are sitting with various collectors who, maybe this is the person that I think should end up buying it from this person, and then you create a relationship between this new person and this other individual or collector, and then they end up talking about other cars or watches, and they get more excited, and I basically just get to help everyone end up expressing their passion. So it's more, passion begets passion in this particular case.
So speaking about cars now, I mean, you've got some fantastic watches, and a lot of them are tied to your taste in cars, but do you feel you collect cars the same way you collect watches? Because I see a split between sort of cars that you see as investments that are going to sit in #1 concours condition, and then your drivers. So how do you structure your car collecting?
So no matter what, I will not own anything that I don't think is an unbelievable car to drive. So even if I have something that I bought for the purpose of collecting, I will still put miles on it, I'll still enjoy it. But there are definitely cars that I'll purchase because there's an experience that they'll be able to provide that nothing else will really be able to provide. And it's one of the reasons I'm so in love with air-cooled 911s, because they just, there's something about one of those cars that captures your heart, and it's not the overall speed, it's not the overall design, although I love the design and they do have fast ones. It's just kind of when you drive an air-cooled 911, it's like composing your own. It's not a masterpiece, but it's like your own soundtrack. It's a smooth jazz, a little bit of rock every time you're in the car, and a good vintage guitar, a good vintage anything has wear, it has marks, it has it's meant to be driven and collect more. So the air-cooled Porsches that are already used, it's kind of like with the vintage Rolexes. I don't need a clear brom. You just drive them. Whatever happens, happens, and you enjoy the car and just being in it. And then there are a few cars like this particular one that it's just the specs are too exciting to not enjoy massively. I mean, this car weighs just at or barely under 3,000 pounds. It has 600 horsepower. And carbon fiber monocoque chassis, and one of the last modern supercars to have a hydraulic steering rack, and it's kind of holding on to that last bit of old school feel, but using complete new technology. I mean, in the somewhat similar circumstance with having a time only watch, where this is just built to go fast. I mean, horsepower kind of does that, but do it as lightly as possible and be able to take as much abuse as possible. So I like that. That tie-in.
Okay, so I see a theme on that table, and it's sports watches. Is it just a coincidence that you didn't bring any dress watches today?
Yes, kind of. First of all, the case that I had actually only has that many spaces in it. Secondly, I really only have one dress watch, and after that, it's tough for me to want or need another one. It was a Jaeger Memovox 14 karat yellow gold that my grandfather owned, and I inherited from him when he passed away. So if I'm ever getting extremely formally dressed up, which especially in 2020 I don't tend to do very often. If I'm doing that, then I kind of want to take him with me, so I end up wearing that, which I'm happy to show you, anytime. But yeah, for this particular, I did stick to my sport watches, as these are what I wear and really collect the most out of.
So it seems like dress watches are not a thing with you, inheritance and sentiment aside.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any types of watches, maybe they're dress watches, that you just wouldn't wear or wouldn't want to wear?
Most dress watches end up not being my thing, really, because of the classic proportions. You have most of them ringing in at 38 millimeters, 36 to 38 millimeters, and also extremely thin. So at that point, it's just not something that kind of works with with my style. And I'm extremely picky watch size wise. I've got my sweet spot, and when things go outside of that, I get a little, I don't end up enjoying it as much, or I overthink it. So yeah, I mean,
Watches too big or too small? Dainty watches, dress watches,
yeah,
Piagets?
yeah, and I appreciate thin watches. So I love the thin watch trend. It's not a trend. I mean, it's historic, but the thinner and thinner, horological masterpieces that are coming out. And I particularly enjoy the new Kingsman edition Jaeger. I think that thing is absolutely awesome, but it's also because it's got a little bit of unique flair with the piece that's above the 12, and that's got a different style. I also don't mind, or I like modern watches that go for a little bit more of a vintage flair, even if they are a classic dress watch. So I really appreciate that particular style.
A couple of philosophical questions now. We're talking about the kinds of watches that you're not really into. We spoke earlier about trends that need to end in the watch hobby. What's your take on that? Are there any?
I definitely think there are ones that could use to be nuanced, and I think my biggest one is people taking an in-demand watch just for the sake of it being in demand instead of something that they really, really, really want. And I don't have a problem with people really wanting something that's new and really cool. I absolutely would love a new Surmet, for instance. I think it would be really cool, but it would only be cool if I can engrave something on the back that really means something to me, and have as a, this was kind of a tough to get thing, but this is really what I wanted and I got it. But we have so many people now that, they'll get a call from their AD and, oh, I have this whatever steel, model, and they look in their watch box and they've got every other steel model from, the past 10 years in it. And it's just kind of another watch that goes on. They're like, I don't know, and then they just go and take it anyways. I turned down a blue dial Sky Dweller because 42 millimeter in that watch on my wrist does not work for me. It's just not my favorite thing. I wish more people would kind of pass that opportunity to the people that really, really, really want the watch.
Yeah, I think basically if you're just getting in because you're checking the box or you just want to flip it, I'm not going to tell you no, but it seems a little bit devoid of soul. Like there's no heart to that.
Yeah, and it's a shame because, and I there's not crying for anyone, but it was so different, even 10 years ago, when short of maybe one of a couple models of something, and especially for Rolex, it used to be the ultimate celebration watch for a special occasion, a host of special occasions, marriages, graduations, work anniversaries, birth of a child, where you buy it and then, give. And we've now hit the point where you really can't do that unless you then have, you can go and buy gray, and that's absolutely fine. But it loses a lot of that initial meaning, and it is one of those things that it's unfortunate more people can't do it for those special occasions in that way as they used to be able to.
So it's hard to mark the moment when you're on a 2-year wait list.
Yeah, and and then that wait list is never just the wait list. It's someone else comes in and buys 3 other watches, and they have a shot at that, and
they jump the line.
Yeah, and it all goes back to I appreciate the story of something. So if someone has something that comes up and it's this really wonderful story, and not a pity story, but something that would be really wonderful to have, one of the most special things I think you can ever give someone or receive for any particular event. And now it's just kind of a part of the game.
So now, a lot of folks would say a McLaren is a dream car, but I think we can all agree that a McLaren 600 is a dream car, and a Duesenberg SSJ is also a dream car, but there's a difference of magnitude. So that's sort of like comparing two Grail cars, one that's within reach and one that maybe is beyond even reach within a dream. Should a Grail watch, in your opinion, be a watch that's a reach within reason or something completely impossible beyond imagination?
I don't think there's one person that would be able to tell you that they have one individual Grail watch, because there are so many different watches that have been around for so long. But I do think there's a little bit of a scale of Grail watch, so to speak. For me, Grail would end up being provenance instead of the actual watch itself. For instance, there are former race car drivers, former trendsetters. I mean, an obvious person to mention would be a McQueen or a Newman kind of thing, where the aspect of being able to find something that someone that you think is just so cool and has such a cool history, and being able to own one of their watches, that to me would be that's my kind of penultimate kind of Grail. But otherwise, there are definitely some high horology, watches that are incredible. I have to say that some of the Patek Grand complications are beyond anything else. When you get to dive down into the details there. But as much of a Grail watch as that may be, is it something that I would really ever like, or would I buy? If I actually had the capital to do it, maybe. But yeah, for me, it still ends up falling into the story of it.
So that's interesting that you mentioned Steve McQueen, because we've got a first-generation Explorer 2 on the table, and you told me that through a first-hand witness, you have confirmation that McQueen did actually wear the early Explorer 2. I suppose that's how you would define a Grail watch, a worn by him McQueen Explorer 2 that confirms the legend and links you to a racing and film hero.
Yeah, something like that would be absolutely incredible, because obviously the watch has had this back and forth of, he wasn't pictured wearing this particular thing in any of the, the movies or seen stuff, but I ended up talking to one of his friends who was a stuntman and a high-speed stuntman, and I showed him pictures of, of this watch, and I was like, hey, out of curiosity, did he ever wear a watch like this? And he said, I mean, older guy, a lot of things can look pretty similar to a degree, but he said, I'm pretty sure he had one or a couple of those. This individual actually has a couple McQueen personal watches that he gave to him, and they're documented. I mean, that part was in there. So he was around it, and he knows what he had. But it's kind of one of these things where, even if it's true or it's not, it was kind of that part of the story where I was like, okay, it would be kind of cool to at least have one that looks like it. But yes, if he actually had one and it was sitting somewhere, in Chad McQueen's, basement at this point, that kind of thing would be absolutely a mega Grail for me. I think that would be incredibly cool.
So we talk about acquiring watches often. We don't often talk about selling watches as collectors and enthusiasts. Do you have any kind of methodology for selling watches? Either you fall out of love, it doesn't get enough wrist time, you want to bring something into the collection and make room. Is it all the above, one more than the others? Or something I didn't think of?
So, to a degree, if something doesn't see my wrist for a long time, or something else has kind of taken that little slot, or I think it would, I will consider selling something. A part of it also ends up being I only have so many actual winders, and with certain watches, and actually really it's the vintage GMT watches that don't have quick set dates, and it takes forever to wind them around and around and around. And I'm one of those people that if I wear a watch, I need it to be telling the accurate time. I want the GMT set the way I want. I need the date accurate. I can't just wear it and have it be wrong. So between that and then perpetual movements, where with my ceramic perpetual that are just, it's a bit of a thing to coordinate everything being in line. Once there's something that needs to take the place of one of those, or if there's something I think could, I need to then consider moving one, maybe moving one out. But But yeah, I mean, I've fallen out of love with stuff as well. It does happen. And even watches that you think that you love more than anything else, at a certain point, they just become not your style. And that's happened with size. I mean, I used to be a big Panerai guy, and I don't have mammoth wrist by any means. They're about 7 inches, and it was one of these things in the beginning when Panerai was fresher. It was the coolest look, and then after a while, I was like, the lugs are almost are the entire size of my wrist, and I just don't wear it anymore. So I've been in and out of stuff like that. And then if there's someone that really, really wants something, that I've got, and there's something that's interesting there, or they have something that I really think is interesting, if there's a good trade story or something there, that's also been a reason why I've let something go. Yeah.
Let me ask, do you have a Grail car?
Grail car.
As you would define it.
My overall Grail car, I have, unfortunately, is not in the garage now. It is on its way to California to get prepped for another show. But it's a Singer Vehicle Design 911. These guys take down a 964 down to the bare chassis, and they rebuild it using absolutely every piece of modern technology and keeping the old school feel in one package. And I've never... Even when I saw it the first time, I just thought it was extremely gorgeous. And then the first time I drove one, I was beyond in love. And then I ended up being able to commission one with them. And they let you choose everything. And I mean, I've never been so in depth in a speccing process of a car ever. And I'm not sure I ever really will be again in the same manner. And then you get to meet these guys that all come from such a different... They come from all over the car world, design world, SpaceX. I mean, this confluence of just amazing people and skills. And you end up building this car, and you end up building your story with these guys. And that experience to me overall really is my Grail experience. And there's really not much that can really top that car for me. Other than that, I do love the Carrera GT. That is a Grail car for me, and I actually have one coming as well. So that's I've kind of knocked 2 of those off the total list. The last Grail car is one that I will very likely never be purchasing, but I am lucky enough to know a few people that own them. I do love the McLaren F1. It's a little cliche. I don't have a problem with it being cliche, because back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I went to London with my parents, went into one of the dealers that was there, and at that time, they had an F1 just sitting there, and it was, comparatively speaking to today, very reasonably priced. But I remember the guy let me go and sit in the center seat, back when I was, extremely, extremely young, and to be able to relive that would be absolutely incredible if it was the kind of thing that I'd be able to own. But they have skyrocketed in value to a different level.
Okay. Just so the watch guys don't feel slighted, we're going to double up the Grail watches here. But I got to know, a modern watch that you consider a Grail watch.
It would probably be in the RM atmosphere. One of the a little bit more ridiculous, varieties, so to speak, that have just a, unfathomable amount of amazing complication, and whether or not it's the kind of thing that I would wear often. I do love the Airbus model that they came out with. There's just something really cool about that to me. Yeah, as far as other stuff that comes to mind, I do love the skeleton pieces from Audemars. I really, really, really would love one of the ceramic skeletons, but because I have this one, I don't want to. I can't say that I'd want to sell this in order to get that one, and I would definitely have to do that, wait list and availability aside. So that's kind of an interesting.
No, that's a Grail of Grails. I think that watch is Michael Friedman's baby. He'd be very happy to know you like it.
Yeah, I think that is one of the coolest mixes of then art, sculpture, and then modern day medium. And for me, in the way that I wear watches, I love the classic perpetual and the gray dial because it's a little bit easier to read. But the art level of one of the open works is really just, it's something else.
So grails aside, what's the next watch that you're going to buy? Because we've all got watches on the brain, and sometimes you're closer to your next watch than your grail watch. So what do you think that'll be?
So I am 100% buying that 41 millimeter OP with green dial. That to me is, I absolutely have at least one of the first coming from my AD. I'm super excited for it, and mainly because of that, just that green British racing green dial. I just think that's too cool. And after that, I'm sure as soon as I end up seeing the Bulgari in person, that will be hard to resist, especially at the price point. I've kind of hit the point where I'd rather kind of enjoy watches that are extremely fairly priced and easy to kind of come in and go out of, because it's kind of a fun style to get to try on, instead of when you do a lot of the watches that are at very different price points where you really need to be invested in everything with that watch in order to want to pull a trigger. So I'm enjoying playing around with some colors and variety and style instead of just these big horological heavy hitters.
Oh, that's good. It's sometimes the best watch is the one that is most immediately, I would say, emotional. It grabs you, it entertains you, it's fun, and it should be fun.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of fun on social media. You've got a bigger social media footprint than most of our Collector Conversation guests. So if folks want to reach out and see more of your world, on track, on the road, and on the wrist, how would they do that?
My Instagram handle is @Coblitz. It's just at my last name. And you'll see a lot of the stuff that I work with. You'll see some of the stuff that I have, but a lot of the things that are on there are things I've arranged for other people, just things I see, and I'm always able to connect very interesting people together. So if that's something that you're interested in, please feel free to follow, send me a message. I'm always happy to know more people.
And if you're interested in fun and usable investments, cars and watches, he's the man to call. Drew, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim.
Time out, Tim out, Drew out. Not quite yet. Drew, how about we go for a ride?
Sounds good.
Thanks for logging on.